Hey, what's up? Jason here from Unity3D.college. Today's code review is on an Asteroids clone. So this is a project that was submitted as part of an interview process and didn't go perfect. So I was going to go over this project and show some of the changes that I would make to it. Now overall, it's pretty good. It's pretty solid, especially given the 8-hour time limit to throw this all together in. But there are some things that I would definitely clean up, and I'm just going to go over those now. The first is, I think, really obvious, and the thing that stood out to me initially was just this damn folder name. It's got an ampersand in it, it's arts and animations, and then you look inside and it's really just sprites. So first thing I do is super simple, make it look cleaner, just change that to art. It already gives a better just kind of first impression there. But that's not really code related, that's more just kind of keeping things clean. But it is important to keep things clean, right? You want to make sure that things are named right. You don't have extra folders or extra files laying around that just aren't in use. And kind of in that vein, when I was going through this, I also noticed a couple other things like an empty script named utils just sitting there. It's not really needed, should be deleted. And a couple other scripts that didn't look like they were actually used. And all of those things, you usually just want to clear them out because they just add extra noise to the project. They make it harder to work with. Even if it's just an empty little script there, it's easy to get mixed up, especially in a bigger project. And you just want to minimize all of that as much as possible. So let's play the game real quick though, and then I'm going to dive into the code. So here we go. We hit play. Got a menu option here for high scores and start game. I can go in, check the high scores. Cool, and I can go start game and fly around with the arrows. Oh, just killed myself. Got a score up in the top corner. Oh, things are even shooting at me. Let me try that one more time. Let's hit an asteroid real quick. I think these things are gonna blow up. There we go. So I can take out the asteroids. I died. Okay, game over. And let's just add a J. Wait, can I type in there? Yeah, JAS. And enter. Did it add my score? Oh, I'm way down here. I have 10 points. Kind of hard to tell if I... Oh, there we go. I am there in number 10. Perfect. So, let's take a look at stuff now. So there's only one scene, so we're just going to dive into this scene first. See what's in here and how this thing is built, how everything's working. So we've got a subfolder of directors. And then we've got a canvas for our UI, okay, and a stage. Now, let's see. Let's take a look at the scene director first. And from what I could tell, this just looks like it's keeping track of the game state. So you can switch between main menu, gameplay, and high score. Totally standard, looks pretty normal. The only thing that was a little bit odd was the director base class. This is really just a singleton pattern, and this should probably just be named singleton, not director base. This is very similar to anything you would find in just a generic singleton implementation. It would say singleton of that, and then let's go back up. Scene director would be a singleton of type scene director instead of director base. There's no actual director functionality in that class, so I just rename it to make it a little bit more obvious. Otherwise, it's a little bit confusing because you might think like, oh, okay, what is this actually doing? And really, it's just handling being a singleton. But other than that, I think the scene director is pretty good. Do have an extra using statement there, though. Always good to just clean stuff up as much as possible. And let's see, a scene state views. Let's see, yep. Got events. The events are even registered and deregistered cleanly, it looks like. Got the nice minus equals there. Okay, so let's go to the next one. Input director. So here we've got some key codes for some keys. We've got actions and events for accelerate, turn, and shoot. So here there are a couple things that I would change. First, I say it all the time, but I would make all of these serialized fields and private, just like that, just so that they aren't accessible outside the class. I'm going to keep that encapsulation whenever possible, and here it looks like it's definitely possible. These are only referenced inside this class, but that's kind of minor. The biggest issue I see here is turn and accelerate are both using events. Now, I personally love events for things like shooting, Any kind of thing that's not happening every frame. When you're doing it every frame, though, there is a bit of a performance cost there from triggering off that event over and over, and it's generally not the best way to go. Just to minimize that performance overhead, I would revamp this a little bit and not have these be events that are registered for. So let's see where they're registered. If we look right here in input director, or no, this is player controller is registering for accelerate and calling accelerate. So what I'd do here instead is, let's go into the input director, and I would just make this a public bool with a getter and a private setter, like that. So accelerate is now a bool, and then we'd say, let's change this, say accelerate equals input.getKey accelerate key. So now we're still separating out our input logic. It's still in this input director, and we can kind of abstract that away from our other code, but we're not firing off an event every time. Now I still need to finish that. So I've got the change right here in a bool, but in the player controller, instead of registering for this as an event, let's see, where's the accelerate method? Right here. So what it would do is go into update and just check something like if input director dot, is it a singleton? Yep, singleton dot instance dot accelerate, and then call accelerate. So just like this. Again, this is just going to be a bit more performant. You don't want to be firing off events every frame for something that is literally going to happen every frame, right? We're always pretty much going to be pushing forward. We're almost always going to be turning. So we may as well make that faster. And I think it's also a little bit simpler too. Kind of simplifies the project. And now I've done that for accelerate. I would also do it for turn. For shoot, I don't know. I may just leave it the way it is. Although for consistency's sake, I'd probably switch that over to and pull the actual shooting out of the input director. So it'd have the input director saying, hey, this thing wants to shoot. The shoot button is down, but whatever's in charge of actually shooting should determine whether or not a shot gets fired. And that may be kind of how this is done. Let me take another quick look. So we go into try shoot. No, it just kind of fires the weapon, it looks like. Oh, wait, well, here, it's firing another event. It goes into here and checking. So we're not, yeah, we're 2 events down before we're checking to see whether or not we should fire. And I think I'm not sure exactly where I'd move this up. I'd probably give the weapon manager some way to look at this. Well, I don't know if this weapon, let me take another quick look. Where's this weapon manager used? It's probably just used on the player. If this is just on the player, I would just give this thing access to read the input and then check for that. It's a, it's a relatively simple Asteroids clone. I wouldn't get too complicated in things. And I think that may be one of the issues here is that it's a little bit over-engineered. There's a lot of eventing and a lot of layers here. And for something as simple as an Asteroids clone, may not need to go quite that far. Okay, let's jump back over to the scene view and take a look at the next class. Persistence Director. Pop this thing open. And we'll go up to the top. So this is really a high score director, I'd say. It's named a little bit odd. And again, the director base part makes it a little confusing because it's really just a singleton. Seems like director is being used in replacement of the word singleton or something here. But again, that's a relatively minor thing. But it could have confused people who were looking at it and didn't realize that this is just a singleton. Anyway, let's see. We've got to get high scores. Let me just check to see if there's a high score data file. You open it using a binary formatter. Okay. And then deserialize out a high score data object. What's this look like? Just a list of scores, and scores are integers with a name and a score. Okay. Implementing iComparable. Seems totally fine. Nothing wrong there. See, set some initial stuff and save high scores. Oh, that's a little odd though. Why are you saving the high scores after? Oh, I'm guessing this is in case there's no initial data here. I would kind of maybe split this off or something. just to make it a little bit more obvious what's going on. Because in a get method, you generally don't want it writing to the drive. And I think there would be some confusion here as to why there's disk access happening when we get high scores. Because writing to the disk is going to be relatively slow. So I would recommend not doing it right here, or at least if you are doing it, conditionally do it on the basis that there are no high scores. And maybe even I think what would be better here is if you loaded this data on awake or on enable, and then just kept that data in memory and then saved it off only when a new high score was done. So you change the data locally and save it, but only ever read it from the file once, and only ever save when the data actually changes. Hopefully that makes some sense. But essentially what's happening here is kind of hitting the disk more than you need. Whenever you have to get high scores, just hitting the disk again. And yeah, I'd minimize that. Now this part here, I guess this explains why it's also named persistence director. I think I would pull this out. So right here it's get available ships, and it's loading all of the ship data from resources, which I thought was pretty cool because it's allowing him to set up multiple different ship types and just load them all in. And if we look at the code here, you'll see that he's actually choosing a random ship. So in the stage manager, he's finding all of the available ships and then choosing one at random. Now, I don't know. Let's see. Is there a reason that that's cached? Is it used somewhere else? Nope. So yeah, you could simplify this a little bit more, not hold on to that, and just make that a var right there. I think that would clean that up just a tiny. But I did like that system there. But of course, again, like I was saying, I think I would pull that out of this persistence manager, make that a high score manager or a high score persistence manager, something like that, and then pull out the ship thing into its own little class. I mean, it'd be a small class, but that's totally fine. A small class that does one thing is a lot better than a big class that does 2 or 3 things. Okay, let's jump back over one more time. What else do we have here? So we looked at the persistence director. Now let's look at the stage manager. So stage manager's got an array for prefabs for asteroids, and then another one for players and for UFOs. All right, let's check it out. Let's see. Well, this one's a little bit long. Oh, it's right at the edge for a good size here. Oh, wait. So there was actually a reference to available ships. I was wrong when I said that we could just pull that out. Here, let me just undo. So it is getting used eventually. There we go. Let's go back through. Apparently I was already in stage manager before I went to the editor and switched back over. Okay, so let's take a quick look here. So we've got an action for lives changed. Okay, I assume this is to update the UI. Panel gameplay manager. Yeah, that's in a UI folder. So that's to update the UI. That's a good idea. I don't know necessarily that lives would belong in a stage manager. It seems like kind of an odd place for it, but having this event to call back is okay. That's good. Let's look at stage changed. And this one's not actually used. So we could delete that right out and then delete this call to it. And in fact, if you do that, then you can just turn this into getter and a setter, simplify and clean things up a little bit. Put a little space there too. Now, what else do we have here? We've got the asteroid prefabs array and the player prefab and the UFO prefab. Okay, cool. And these are all marked private with exactly what they need. I don't know necessarily that. Let's take a look at these. How are these spawned and what's going on here? So if we go into here, okay, here's an issue that I see. So let's go. Well, here, let's take a look. So what we do is we instantiate an asteroid prefab, and then we get the asteroid controller component of it. Close to good, but this does open up an issue, which is like, if we're in here in the editor and say, hey, I'm a random guy that doesn't know what I'm doing, and I made a cube, turned it into a prefab, dropped it right into the prefabs folder, and then I went on to my, where was that, stage, and assign a cube here. It's going to let me assign it, and then the code's going to blow up, right? Because our cube doesn't... Oh, I've got an error here too. What did I break? Something else. Oh, I just realized that this is private, so it doesn't even need a getter and a setter. That's a problem. Tried to add a getter and a setter there. So this should really just be current stage. Oh, yeah, now I can just delete that because it's already up here. So that current stage wasn't really doing anything other than trying to fire off an event that wasn't actually registered for. Okay, cool. So that's cleaned up. Now let's see. Let's save and make sure I can compile real quick. We'll jump back in and then we'll show that error. Cool. Compilation worked. Or compilation worked. Let's hit play. And we should be able to blow up as soon as it tries to spawn a cube instead of an asteroid. Okay, let's almost there. Start game. Ah, no errors. Come on. Can we get an error message here? Oh, I think I need to blow up one of these. Oh, there we go. So when I blew one of those up, that's when it tried to spawn the next one, and everything broke. Now again, if you set it all up yourself, sure, not a problem. But if you're working with anybody else, you want to make sure that we enforce some constraints here. So to fix that, we could really simplify things. We can copy that, delete this get component call, and then up here, change that to be typed. So that now our asteroid prefabs require the asteroid controller. Now it's going to break my references up here. Let's see, let's stop. And there, I need to reassign them. But now I can't assign things that are invalid. I can only assign things that have the component on them, and I don't have to have that extra get component call. So let's see, we can go into, what is this under? Asteroids. I think it started off big, medium, small, I hope. I think that was right. There we go. And now that's a little bit cleaner. Again, it's just the main thing there is enforcing that the right object types are getting used and that you can't just accidentally throw in the wrong thing, accidentally misuse it and break things. It's a really good idea to just kind of really enforce things as much as possible. Now, the same would be said for this player prefab and UFO prefab. Both of these, I'm assuming, should be something other. Yeah, this one's looking for a UFO controller, and the player prefab one is looking for a player controller. So I'd strongly type these as well to player controller and UFO controller. Now let's take a look a little bit further down. So we've got a current stage. I don't know what this is for. I think this is just going through different levels. And then, okay, if we've run out of targets, we increment the stage, and then we create the stage with a number. Okay, here's another issue. Spaces. Put a space between every method. Makes it a lot easier to read. Just a single extra little space there. Can go a huge way. Okay, so here, okay, create a stage is really just spawning asteroids based on the number of, or the stage number times 2, it looks like. And then it creates asteroid of size 3. I assume that's the, that like the small, medium, large stuff. So that's fine, I guess, right? It's just kind of incrementing those. I might add in a little something there in between the, where was that? The increment. It's in, oh, right here. So I might add a little bit of something there just with some sort of a delay and maybe some text that pops up and says, hey, you stage completed, you're going on to the next one. With this, you just really have to kind of kick off a coroutine or something like that. They would just do a little bit of a delay and pop that up. But other than that, it seems okay. And stage manager, probably okay. I think one thing I might do here, I just don't know because it might be over engineering with an asteroids clone. I was thinking like just having an asteroids manager that's responsible for spawning the asteroids. Now, one thing I would definitely do is with this create asteroid, this should be pooled. There's no, these are things that are getting instantiated and destroyed constantly. There's no reason not to use a pooling system. And the same applies for firing the weapon. So if we're looking in here, I should delete this stupid cube. Be a little bit too late this time, but whatever. Let's hit play, start game, and watch over here. And you see that, like the missiles, they're not pooled, so they're just constantly getting added. And like I said, in this simple little demo, it may seem totally irrelevant, and it would be, but if it's for an interview, I'd say that getting a pooling system in there just shows that you know the benefits behind it. And I mean, the biggest benefit behind a pooling system is that you're not going to be generating a bunch of garbage, which on a mobile device or on a console can be a big performance problem, right? You build up a bunch of garbage generating all these things, they get destroyed, they keep using up memory, then garbage collector hits, and bam, you get a frame that is ultra slow. You get that little half-second or 1 second lag spike depending on how old the device is. So I'd say definitely pooling. Pooling is like the #1 thing that I would add in here, besides changing those events to be polling instead of events for the input. The next thing would be definitely pools. And if you're looking for pooling stuff, not sure how to do it, I've done a couple videos on the subject. I'll try to link them below so you can just check it out and see how to set up a pooling system. And it's actually really easy. You just kind of build a very generic system and reuse it across projects and avoid all of that garbage creation. It's pretty nice and pretty simple to do. Now, to avoid going too long, I'm just going to hit 2 more little subjects here that I think are kind of important. So the first is the text here is not using TextMesh Pro. No good reason not to use TextMesh Pro. I'd swap all of these out and just put in TextMesh Pro. At the very least, it shows that you kind of know that the Unity text sucks and that it can be much better. But on top of that, it also just would make the project look better. Performs better, looks better. TextMesh Pro all the way for just about any text in any game. And then the last thing I wanted to hit on was really a simple one. So let's dive into the... Where was that? In actors, and I think it might have been in actor base. No, it wasn't here. So, well, there are a couple things, I guess. Look, I said one thing, but let me just talk a little bit more. Actor base seems like it's a shared class for the player and the projectiles and the targets. And I get the point. It's just handling movement in whatever direction and then doing the screen looping. It's cool. It could also just be a component, though. It doesn't necessarily need to be a base class. And I think in this case, having it as a component that just moves based on the velocity would probably be a little bit cleaner. And I'm a big fan of using components instead of inheritance most of the time, just because it feels a little bit cleaner. It's a little bit easier to extend and a little bit easier to understand what's going on most of the time. That said, it's not a terrible thing here. Using an actor base here that's doing some shared behavior for all of them is fine, but I probably switch it up. If I were doing it, I probably would have done it as a component. And there was something else in here. Oh, I think it was in the accelerate method. So one thing I wanted to show here was that what you could do is actually kind of get rid of some of this, set the current velocity like that, and then you can just do vector3 dot clamp magnitude, and you can give it the current velocity. So you do like this. So current velocity equals vector3 dot clamp magnitude that comma max speed. There you go. So you do that, and you can kind of simplify stuff, and then also keep your thing at the actual maximum speed, never going really over or below. Right? With the other solution, you get a tiny bit above or below it. It probably wouldn't be noticeable at all, but this is just a little bit shorter and a little bit simpler, taking advantage of some of the built-in functionality. Anyway, like I said before, I think this is a pretty good project, especially for an 8-hour little application project, sending it in to submit it. There were a couple little things to change, but overall it's not bad. It's functional. It's relatively well split out. And yeah, I was pretty happy looking at it overall, I guess. So anyway, if you have a project that you want to have reviewed too, feel free to just, if you're on my email list, just reply to one of those emails and send over the project. I've still got a big backlog of these, but I'm just kind of going through and picking ones that make sense to talk about for the day. So if you got a good one that you want to submit and just, don't mind having all your code shared and talked about online, feel free to just send it over, and I'd love to take a look. Also, if you have some other things in here that you noticed that you think like maybe I should have talked about or just didn't get to or I was wrong about, drop a comment below and let me know. Be happy to check them out, and always good to get good feedback on things that I miss. Just going through a project, it's easy to miss a subject or miss a very obvious issue or mistake. So I'm happy to see those below as well. Anyway, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share with your friends, and have a great day. Keep coding.